Hey, hi everybody, and welcome to this session with Rozena Freelancer. My name's Rozena, and I will be delivering this session. In terms of what this session will cover, I'll provide an introduction to myself, talk about why engagement and um, what got me interested in engagement and why I chose it as an area of focus for my freelance work. There will then be an opportunity to take a short access break. I'll then talk about how and why I became a freelancer, how I can help you, unique selling points, upcoming events, and some other things. So in terms of an introduction to myself, so as I mentioned, my name is Rosina and my pronouns are she, her. I'm a new freelance engagement consultant who is passionate about engaging underrepresented groups in democratic governance, representation and campaign activity, and other engagement activity. And then just a few personal things about myself. So I was born, raised, and live in the West Midlands in the United Kingdom. And outside of my professional life, I have lots of hobbies. For example, I'm a very creative person, so I have a lot of creative hobbies. So in terms of why engagement, so I'm going to split this into three main time periods. The first is pre/during university. The second will be post-university, and the third will be um this sort of past year. So in terms of pre and like during university, so I'm going to start off with sixth form. When I was in sixth form, I became really interested in engagement and educational experiences in the early years and at primary school level. And I was initially interested in particular in the impact of socioeconomic status on educational engagement. And the reason that I was interested in socioeconomic status specifically is because like I myself am from a low income family and grew up around others from more sort of privileged backgrounds. So I sort of experienced classism sort of firsthand growing up. Um, I do also identify with other like minority groups. So like as you can probably tell, I'm not white. I'm also Muslim. I have chronic health issues and I'm also a woman. For these identities though, I would say I didn't really think about these as much from a sort of lived experience perspective or um from an academic perspective or how like having lived experience of a certain identity can give sort of means you have expertise in that sort of area. And I didn't really think about that until sort of later, but I'll sort of talk more about that a bit later in the session. Um, So when I was in university, so I sort of undertook various different student experience and student engagement work in universities and student unions. So that involved, for example, running an award-winning society, serving as an elected student trustee, and undertaking some student representative work, and delivering sort of other like democratic campaigns. And it was through this that I became really fascinated by student engagement in higher education and how this relates to experiences in the early years and pre-university experiences. Um, Also, the university where I studied my undergraduate degree at, there was a large number of mature students as well as like local students and commuter students. So this also got me really interested in pre-university experiences. In terms of my academic studies, um, for my undergraduate degree, I studied psychology and child development, and for my master's, I studied psychology research methods. Um, and through my degree studies and like my assignments and my dissertations, I started sort of studying student engagement in higher education academically. And I was sort of fascinated to find that there's a whole research area in psychology around student engagement and how a lot of research has found that there are links between student engagement and retention. Um, in terms of personal lived experiences and the wider sort of political climate, so whilst I was in university, I started to sort of develop an interest in politics and political engagement sort of more widely. Um, and in particular, well, when I was in university, so sort of between 2015 to 2019. So this was, of course, during the Brexit years. And when I was studying my master's in sort of 2018, 2019, that was during the run up to the 2019 general election. So it was a very sort of hype year and sort of hype time for politics in the UK. In higher education, there was, of course, a lot of talk about the impact of Brexit and politics more widely on higher education. And as someone who's Muslim and, from a global majority background, sort of living during that time period, this sort of also got me thinking about political engagement from that perspective. Um, One final thing about sort of my time in university. So throughout university, I sort of learned a lot more about intersectionality. So for example, like the intersection between socioeconomic status and race, or socioeconomic status and gender, and the intersection between like race and religion, and how it's important to acknowledge intersectionality. So yeah, this sort of helped to inform the work that I was doing and sort of develop my sort of insight into engagement. Um, okay, so I'm going to talk about after university now. So when I finished university, so I worked in a students' union for a few years, sort of undertaking student voice work. And my work was in particular focused on democratic engagement. So it involved, for example, delivering some of the biggest student leadership elections in the country and some of the biggest democratic events in the union's history. And it's here, in this role, I sort of developed further knowledge and insight into areas like community organising, campaigns, decolonisation, policy, as well as areas like EDI and well-being. Whilst I was in this role, so I was keen to learn more about governance, and develop experience in the area of governance. So that was sort of following my sort of student trustee work in university. And I was fortunate enough to like land a school governor role. Um, I was also aware that certain groups of people do tend to be underrepresented on governance boards. So just by just sort of doing a Google search, I actually came across a national campaign which advocates for increased diversity on charity trustee boards. And yeah, I was like super, super happy when I found this campaign. But with this campaign, I basically became, so it's like a member network as well. So I became a member for a couple of months, and then I started volunteering in network engagement work. Um, yes, and then after my student union job, so I worked for another organization which also advocates for trustee diversity, but diversity in a more sort of broader sense. But the role that I was doing there was quite a varied role, but there was a big focus on marketing and engaging current and aspiring charity trustees and charity leaders with um our like webinars and um uh training programs and things like that. So this work on governance and trustee diversity campaigns, this work is where my interest and enthusiasm for engagement and governance really developed, in particular engagement of underrepresented groups. The final area that I'd like to talk about in terms of after university is political psychology and mental health and well-being. So um, after I finished university, I updated my membership with an academic membership body. So I sort of changed my membership from student membership to graduate membership. And through this process, I saw that there was a member section for political psychology, and came across some events and webinars related to decolonisation of mental health. Um, and yeah, these areas were quite new to me at the time. So I started to become engaged with these areas of work within this membership body. And alongside my sort of personal experiences of activism, lived experience of like anxiety, as someone who is a brown Muslim woman with chronic health issues, some other bits of EDI and wellbeing work, I became really interested in areas sort of related to this. So, for example, like activist wellbeing, mental health and wellbeing of minoritized people, the intersection between EDI and well-being, and also decolonization of mental health. All this work that I've sort of talked about after university um, helped me to sort of to provide me with a broader insight of member engagement and also student engagement as well, sort of outside of like student unions and the higher education space. So in terms of the past year, so in February 2024, following the network engagement work that I was doing with the Trustee Racial Diversity campaign, I had switched to a freelance role. Um, so this role I was sort of doing part-time alongside sort of full-time work. And I still undertook member engagement work, but sort of also got involved in areas like partner engagement, marketing, and delivering events, sort of online and in-person events. There have also been other activities related to engagement that I've undertaken, but I'll come back to those a bit later in the session. So for now, I appreciate I've talked a little bit, so please do feel free to take a short break. You can stop the recording, get some fresh air, get a snack, whatever you'd like to do. And yeah. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about how and why I became a freelancer. So um sorry, I'm going to talk about how and why I became Rosina Freelancer. So the first reason, which is probably the more obvious reason, is the freelancing that I was doing with the Trustee Diversity campaign. So this inspired me to continue undertaking freelance work, which involves engaging global majority people and other underrepresented groups in areas like governance and campaigns in a sort of freelance capacity. Um, I'd say another motivator for this like freelance work is also like political circumstances in the UK and internationally. Um, a lot of global majority people would sort of describe this past year as having been quite a traumatic year. Same with Muslims as well. Um, yeah, and in engagement work, so of course, diversity and lived experience perspectives are really important, especially because engagement work tends to involve, well, yeah, tends to involve areas like EDI, accessibility, inclusion, diversity. So lived experience is really important to um lived experience perspectives are really important to hear there. Um, Yeah, and following from this, it's becoming increasingly important to advocate and acknowledge engagement of minoritized communities and approach engagement from a more decolonial lived experience and holistic perspective. So how can I help you? So as mentioned at the start, I'm a new freelance engagement consultant who is passionate about engaging underrepresented groups in democratic governance, representation and campaign activity and other engagement activity. And there are five key services that I would be able to offer starting from January 2025. So the first one, which is probably the most obvious, is engagement consultancy and support. So this could involve, for example, providing feedback and guidance on engagement work, or it could involve helping to actually deliver work. Because I'm still undertaking freelance work with a trusted diversity campaign and also working full time. Um, any work that any sort of consultancy or support that I offer would, of course, ideally need to be smaller sort of projects. So it could be, for example, helping you to create an engagement plan for a campaign. It could be scheduling some social media posts or like analyzing data for a member survey. The next service is webinars and events. So in early 2025, I will be delivering some open sort of webinars and events. Following from that, and how many I sort of do will of course depend on my capacity. Um, Another thing following from um the events and webinars that I'll be hosting in early 2025 is that I can also offer bespoke webinars. So webinars that are sort of more specific to your organization or the work that you undertake. Um, Also the webinars and events would be related to like different topics related to engagement in governance and democracy and campaigns and like representation activity. For content creation, so this is another service that I'd be keen to offer. So this would involve, as the name says, creating content related to different topics on engagement. So this content could be, it could be a blog, it could be an article, it could be a video. Um, yeah. And finally, the last service is mentoring. So this would be for people who are like activists, campaigners, organizers, or representatives, or anyone who is new to like engagement in areas like democracy, campaigns, governance, or sort of other engagement activity. The mentoring would mainly ideally be for people who are working in organizations or institutions, but individual people can also take this up if they would like to. Um, for transparency purposes, so because I am a freelancer, of course, these are services that I would charge for. Um, I do understand that education around areas like mental health and democracy and decolonization is like really important and can at times be inaccessible. So in very, very exceptional circumstances, I am happy to offer sort of discounted or pro bono work. In terms of unique selling points, so I've probably covered some of these already. So yeah, as talked about, I have varied experience in different aspects of engagement from various contexts. I have lived experience. And also, although I do, of course, have some expertise in engagement, I also understand that I'm not a professor or a scholar. So I'm always actively trying to improve my skills and experience and knowledge and expertise. In terms of upcoming events, so I've mentioned that in early 2025, I'll be hosting some webinars and events. Details of these will be on our social media soon, and I'll share details of our social media at the end of the session. Some other things. So for future webinars and events, I would be really keen to have speakers and panelists. Um, and yeah, so if this is something that you would be interested in, please do feel free to get into contact and I'd be happy to have a conversation. And same with if you're interested in collaborating, I'd be very open to that and open to having a conversation about that as well. So again, feel free to get into contact. Um, And yeah, that is everything. Thank you so much for listening. And you can find details of my social media and contact details on here. Um, yeah, if you would like me to support you or you'd like to collaborate, please feel free to, or if you just have any questions in general, just feel free to, yeah, get into contact. And yeah, I would be happy to help. Um, in the meantime, thank you again for listening, and I will let you go and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye bye.